Well, hello and welcome to the Cultural Stew Podcast mini episode, something I'd like to call Moments of Influence. Each episode, what we're going to do is kind of go through a piece of media, whether it's film, a TV episode, book, or even music, and talk to somebody where that certain piece of media has been influential in their lives and is kind of helped define or shape who exactly they are. Today, my first guest is none other than Chris O'Brien.
None other. The infamous, right?
The infamous. Yeah, some people have no exactly clue who you are. You're well known to me, but who are you, Chris?
Well, I guess my name is Chris O'Brien. I'm internet famous for my podcast, Running Inside Out. I'm world renowned for my mediocre trail running and cunning wit in Rochester. So there you go.
Awesome. So Chris has graciously agreed to be my first subject here with this new show, and the media that he's chosen to discuss is...
Oh, I'll say that. The Back to the Future Trilogy.
Back to the Future Trilogy. The Back to the Future Trilogy came out with the first one in 1985.
85. I was a mere 7 years old. Actually, yeah, I was just about to be 7 years old.
Do you remember actually seeing this in the theaters when it first came out?
I did not. That was the first viewing was a Blockbuster video rental.
Blockbuster videos. It's hard to believe there's actually still some around in the world.
VHS style, you know. So
your first viewing, what got you into it? Who brought you into it?
I don't really know. I don't know what the impetus was for viewing it or watching it. I have to think that it was one of those, my mom rented the movies for, let's watch some movies tonight. And that's how we watched it. That was how I watched a lot of 80s movies at first, was like, we didn't do anything. We didn't go anywhere. So we would just like rent a movie and sit around at home and watch the movie.
So Back to the Future. Tell me a little bit about it.
So, Back to the Future, for those who are living now, in the now, it's essentially there's a doctor who invents a time machine, and it's powered by plutonium, which he's stolen from the Libyans. And one day, our hero, Michael J. Fox, goes to the doc's house, finds that the doc's not there, gets a call. All this happens where Marty McFly happens upon the dock in a parking lot as he's running his very first tests of the time machine, and the Libyans are coming. And so right from the beginning, you have the stolen plutonium, the Libyans come in, and Marty McFly happening upon the doctor.
The doctor. So Michael J. Fox plays Marty McFly, and the doctor is...
It's
Christopher Lloyd.
Well, I was going to say I was trying to say what people know him from, because Christopher Lloyd was right at that point. He was famous for doing Taxi, but only people that are our age, 40 or older, are going to know Taxi. So I was trying to think what Christopher Lloyd had done recently that people would know him from. But anyways,
and that's kind of what Michael J. Fox was in. He was
in Family Ties.
Family Ties. Yep. Had he done Werewolf yet?
Nope, he hadn't done Teen Wolf.
So he was just breaking out himself.
Well, that was one of the big cruxes of the movie, is it wasn't going to be Michael J. Fox. They originally shot about a third to a half of the scenes with another actor. And because Michael J. Fox was doing Family Ties, he couldn't get out of the commitment. And they got about halfway through the movie, and they're like, this is a great actor, but it's just not working. Like, the chemistry's not there. They shot a few scenes with Michael J. Fox, and they're like, we have to make this work. So he's this young kid. He's doing Family Ties, the TV show, during the daytime. Somebody comes and picks him up, drives him over to the studio, and he shoots Back to the Future. So he's doing like double duty to try to make this work. And as soon as they had a couple scenes on film with him, they're like, okay, the other guy, you're out,
So this movie comes to us by the director, Robert Zemeckis.
Right.
Which is interesting because I actually grew up with his cousins, and they used to always talk about Robert Zemeckis this, Robert Zemeckis that, and it's always interesting if you like go through Robert Zemeckis' career. He has this thing with time travel, and it just keeps like reappearing. But it also comes from Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy, that group,
and Bob Gale,
that basically, in a way, formulated most of my childhood with film.
Yep.
The same production team of everything with Amblin Entertainment going on.
Yep.
So going back into the story, he gets the plutonium. They go back in time, and where does he end up?
So what happens is the way that it happens, right, is the Libyans shoot Doc Brown. And Michael J. Fox is like, oh, my God, they just killed Doc. I got to get out of here. And he hops into the DeLorean, right? And he doesn't know that it's a time machine, like how it works. He just gets in a DeLorean and he books it, right? And he takes off.
And what an odd choice, a DeLorean.
Well, imagine if it was any other car, right? It would be kind of boring. There were a limited number of DeLoreans on the road, and it was extremely unique. And it was kind of a junky car, right? But it's a very unique looking car. It was at the time maybe the most futuristic car,
Absolutely.
But so he books it and accidentally transports himself back in time to 1955.
Where he runs into
his mom.
And that mom was played by Leah Thompson.
Leah Thompson at that point, right?
And his father played by
Crispin
Glover.
Crispin Glover, who has become much more famous and creepy now.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
He plays he was in that Rats movie or whatever. Ooh, super creepy. But yeah, so it was Leah Thompson, and what a great pick for that role, right? Because she's known for purity and being, kind and keen and gentle, and suddenly she's hitting on her son, right?
Yep.
And I think that's the thing about this Back to the Future. Imagine that movie being shot now, right? With all the pedantic internet trolls and all the quick feedback message boards and everything like that, this movie would be absolutely destroyed on the internet, right? You'd get the nerds being like, a gigawatt actually, and plutonium cannot power. And it would be destroyed on a technical level. It would be destroyed on a moral level. This is a movie about incest and oh my goodness, right? And the Doc being super old and Marty being super young and all the pedantic stuff would just rip this movie apart. But this is 1985. The people that talk about it were the people in your own social circles, right? So your friends. If you're in the sci-fi or if you're in comedy and action, you're talking to those friends about this movie. Did you see that? Oh my God, a hoverboard. I can't even believe it, right? And I think that's what's really cool about this movie is that it's definitely a product of its time. It hit this really sweet spot in the mid-1980s when everybody is super excited about technology, and but technology hasn't got to a point where it's kind of eating itself, and society is not. The idea of the internet troll is not invented. The worst thing we had was Siskel and Ebert, right? And they would tear apart a movie, and what young kids cared about Siskel and Ebert's opinion of a movie.
When I was that age, I always got them confused with Bert and Ernie. I was like, wait, no, that's not the same person.
Right. The two old guys up in the Muppets balcony.
So take me back. You're a young kid. They just picked it up for Blockbuster Video. They put it in old VHS, just sitting there, cranking up.
I think I probably watched that movie after I saw the first one. I probably watched it 5 to 6 times in the next month or so, which now that's probably not a lot, right? People sit in front of a Netflix show a whole bunch, but back then to watch a movie 5 times, right?
You had to rewind it.
Exactly.
You had to sit there and wait for it to rewind before you could actually start it over.
And you only had one TV in the house, right? You were the one stealing the TV.
And if you got it from Blockbuster, you had to go take it in, put it through the drop, hopefully that they'll scan it so that you can re-rent it back out and walk her back out the door.
Yep. Yeah, I watched it a whole bunch. And there's so many things about it that are fun. I mean, the comedy is right on, right? Right from the very beginning of the Rube Goldberg machine that the Doc has to feed Einstein, his dog, right? right from that very beginning thing, you're just like, what is this all about? And then they got the silly gag with the speaker, and he blows the speaker, and the doc says, "Hey, don't play with the speaker. There's something wrong with the amplifier." Like, it's all these little silly things that for a kid, you like. They have this way in the movie where they allow you to notice it, and they don't like the Michael J. Fox, Marty McFly's skateboard rolls underneath the bed and bumps into a box that says plutonium. And they don't do anything else. They don't say anything else. He just picks up the skateboard and runs away. It's not like he peeks down there and goes, "Oh, plutonium. I wonder if that's going to matter later." But it allows you as a kid to be like, the news just said plutonium, and I just saw a box of plutonium. What's about to happen, you know?
It's foreshadowing on a kid level.
Right.
Just enough for you to make the connections.
And on a kind of a fun, creative level, right? And they took this concept. Time travel movies are awesome, right? Let's face it. Everybody loves the idea of time travel. What would you do if you could go back in time or forward in time? And they took it and they did not overcomplicate it, right? They put it on the most basic way of, you go back in time, you don't want to meet any of your parents because you're going to change their life. What happens if you change their life? Oh, you might not exist, right? That's so simple. Everybody makes that first leap. And then you start things like they meet at the Twin Pines Mall. Well, when Marty goes back into time, the DeLorean runs over one of the trees. When they go back to the future, back to 1985, it's the Lone Pine Mall. Simple, little, but when you watch it, you go, wow, that's kind of neat, Like,
yeah, they show the little pieces of the butterfly effect and how
but they don't overburden it with the technicalities.
Right.
They let it be fun.
So you watched it 5 or 6 times. What were the long-lasting effects of it? I mean, where does it
I think there's
apply to your life there?
When you're in high school, there was just the jokes, right? Like, hey, you get your damn hands off her, right? Like, how many times did we say that line, all right? Or like, I can't give you a tab unless you order something. Just all those silly little jokes. 1.21 gigawatts, 88 miles per hour. All these things sort of work their way into your vernacular a little bit, And then you see things like self-lacing shoes in Back to the Future 2. You see the hoverboard chase, and you're like, we totally should have hoverboards. And then now you see that carrying on. People that were inspired by Back to the Future become inventors and actually make a hoverboard. The idea of the concept of going back in time and having the sports almanac and knowing who's going to win the World Series, and like you bring those jokes sort of into your life, and that was one of the biggest things. And Michael J. Fox just became kind of this constant in my life. Everything he did, I watched. I even got into Family Ties because of Back to the Future, And then you see Michael J. Fox get Parkinson's, and you're like, wow, you've seen him from this little kid. Now he's this grown man having this struggle, and you see him fighting through it, and it's just this persistent thing in your life,
And so they put out Back to the Future, and they realize, man, they have a hit on their hands. It gets nominated for and wins for Best Oscar for Best Effects and Best Sound Effects Editing. So it actually got an Oscar to its name. In terms of rating, the first one is far above what the other two are. You get the second one, which is them going into the future as opposed to Back to the Future. And then you have the third one, which brings them way back in the past, back into the West. I personally don't like the third one, even though I like Westerns.
Oh, man. See, that's the funny thing. Like, they play on each movie, though. Each one goes into the other one, And even in the third one, some of the themes are the same, right? It was called Barton Ravine, and then it becomes Eastwood Ravine, right? Because Clara Barton didn't die going over the
did,
right. So they thought Eastwood did, right? Because he
took the DeLorean across.
But the same themes are there, and some people didn't like it because it got tired, right? Like that's part of it, I guess. Some of the gags got old, but if you're a fan of it, you love those kind of subtle callbacks. The biggest thing was, why do we even like Marty McFly? There's no reason to like Marty McFly. You don't know about, like, he doesn't grow in these movies at all. He never learns a lesson. He never becomes like a better person. He's just a guy going through this thing, trying to get a girlfriend, you know, trying to get a wife, trying to keep his family like tree from going, but there's no real like protagonist appeal to him. And that's what's funny to me is why do we even care about Marty McFly? What's it matter?
Right.
And yet we still watch. And so every time that he got called chicken, I'm like, you're an idiot. You're being called chicken, and you go and, you know, get yourself into a gunfight, get yourself into a drag race, get yourself into a fight at a dance because you're an idiot, you know?
And some of that is part of the product of the times. I mean, there's some things that, like, this is what you would call somebody who is a bully or wanted to get them upset at you during the 80s. Now, you know, what you have to say to somebody to get them into a fight is completely different.
But the second movie, when it went back into the first movie and they show him running through the dance and they show him actually drop the sandbags on the three people that were chasing him, right? Biff's goons were chasing him. He drops the sandbags, and then you see him walk off the stage after playing. You know, that's just fun stuff when you think about time travel without getting too like into the, well, that obviously couldn't happen, right. You know? And I guess that was the thing about the third one. All those jokes were spent, you know, but I enjoy all three of them, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you have them kind of using the same, like the manure scene over in all three different versions to three different Biffs.
Yep.
You know,
but like the second one was super dark, right? And so I think the third one was a blend of humor and darkness, right? But the third one is really, if you think about it, it's less about Marty, and in that movie, it's actually all about Doc.
About Doc, yeah.
Yeah, the whole movie is focused on Doc, which maybe might have rubbed some people the wrong way. Like, why do they care about Doc? Because they've had Marty for two movies.
It makes you think, was this actually about Doc the whole time? The whole thing is all about Doc and not about Marty.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like I said, there's no reason to care about Marty McFly. There's none. Yeah. You know,
and he even gets an upgrade in his truck during the process of it. So you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, he gets everything.
So those are the wrap up of the movies there, and there's some interesting things I was pulling out about like some of the people that pop up in these movies outside of those main. You got Billy Zane pops up in the first one.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got Flea pops up as one of Biff's side goons. You got Elijah Wood pops up as one of who's the kid playing the arcade, right?
He's playing. He was playing what? He's the one that took over the game for Michael J. Fox, right? Wasn't it? Yeah. So. There's a lot of people in it.
And then you got the ZZ Top in the third one.
Yeah. Well, and Huey Lewis did the soundtrack, right, for the first one. And Huey Lewis was like, I don't know. And then he did
Power of Love?
Well, the Power of Love was like the big one. And then, because he's like, I don't want to write a song about time travel. And they're like, well, don't just write a song. And so he did Power of Love, which was
Back in Time.
And then Back in Time rolled at the end credits, you know.
So you got those two. And then you've got Mark Silvestri making the main
which,
theme.
I mean, that,
everybody recognizes that theme as soon as you hear it.
That theme is big deal, right?
And then there's that little you can hear it in the Ready Player One soundtrack. It's that that little tiny little thing that everybody knows. Oh, that's the Back to the Future thing. That something's gonna happen. Here we go.
Yeah. So, and it's neat. I mean, and some of those cultural tropes still stay around, right? Like everybody knows 1.21 gigawatts, right? Like even if an 88 miles an hour is just a big joke, right? That just is subtle in the culture now, and it's just stuck there.
I swear I just heard somebody in the news broadcast just used 88 miles an hour the other day. He's like, oh yeah, I know, I got to keep it up at 88 miles an hour. It's like, what?
So those are all super important and funny jokes to me in my lifetime. And so my kids are 7. I was 7 when this movie came out. Hey, let's watch some Back to the Future. Number one, I did not realize how much casual swearing is in this movie. Like, and it's not hardcore. It's just casual, you know. Marty just busts out a couple words, or, you know, Biff, and they just happen.
I've found this as I've been taking my girls back on some of the movies like that I watched when I was young. I'm like, wow, this has a lot more adult-oriented stuff, a lot more. I'm like, I don't remember all this.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I'm just like, you kind of get this like embarrassment moment as an adult, but you're like, you know what? I turned out fine.
Yeah.
What the hell?
And this is the context for them to hear the words in, right? I mean, these are not hardcore words. These are people doing it in dramatic situations, right? And what the other part was, and I'm beginning to learn this with all of media that my kids consume, is that movies in the 80s especially were much slower with their setups and their payoffs, right? Like the idea of first act, second act, third act, right? The first act of 80s movies and even some early 90s movies is much slower than what we see today. Today, you open with an explosion and a kabang and a kaboom, and you got a whole bunch of action happen, and then they tell you who's involved. And that's the exact opposite. So in Back to the Future. Back to the Future starts off with a kid waking up in bed and like, man, why is this guy there and what's it matter? Sure, we talked about the Libyans, but that's it. Once that happens, the dude's in 1955.
Yeah, and in watching that out of context, you don't get the Libyan joke, and you realize, like, oh, yeah, it was very newsworthy at that time. So it was prominent. Like, parents would be like, oh, yeah, there we go. There's the Libyans we're talking about. Now we're just like, who?
Yeah, and it's just boring for them. They were bored out of their mind. And so I would skip over, like, in an effort to try to salvage some of it, I would skip over some of the slightly boring parts just so that they could see the flames, right? And see the flames come off the tires and see him go back in time. Or I would go to the part where he's playing at the ball and he's playing this music. Or I would try to find the cool scenes. And I think they sort of liked it. Honestly, they kind of liked the third one the most because it was about trains and about Wild West and about guns and like things that they don't see very often, you know, a world that they don't really know. So it's very funny to sort of, again, talk about how meaningful it was for us because it took the 1980s that we knew and sort of extended it back into the past and showed us how it happened. And then it stretched forward. And let's not talk about the climate that they go to in 2015 and how similar it feels to 2018. You know, they got so many things right when predicting the future. It's pretty crazy. Like the Cubs winning the World Series. Who... Really?
I mean, your odds are they're going to win sometime, but the fact that they actually put it down in the movie was,
and that it actually happened.
There would be a team in Florida at that time, and that was 7-8 years before that even happened.
Yeah. So I mean, they did a lot of things right, but now it holds up for me because I experienced it, but I don't know that it holds up for the kids. Whereas I think something else that Spielberg did, like Indiana Jones, I think that would hold up better for kids.
And I think some of that revolves around technology. When you have something that's like a historical context, like Indiana Jones per se, you have something that's like, oh, it's so far back that it's a historical drama per se. Whereas Back to the Future, it's the 80s. I mean, much, and it's technology. But I think a lot of it plays into the fact that when we were that age, our sphere of media influence was very, very small.
Yep.
We didn't have much to choose from. Blockbuster was the bomb or the theater or what you could tune into on the radio or go check out of the library. But even then, I don't think you couldn't check any videos or anything out of the library at that time. It was before they even started that.
Yep.
But now, I mean, kids have access to everything. You pull up a tablet, you pull up a phone, you pull up Netflix. You have a wealth of stuff that you can watch at any point in time, and a lot of it's really good. There's a lot of crap in there that's thrown in, but the water's been so diluted that if they didn't have access to that, I think maybe that influence would be a little bit different.
Which Back to the Future also got right? The wall screens and, you know, young Marty McFly picking what he wants to watch on the TV. Yep. So, I mean, they did a lot of things right. I wish they could have predicted a happier 2015, but, you know, whatever. Well, I do think, though, still give it a try with the kids. Like, don't be off put, right? I mean, you got to give it a try.
My feeling is I try to introduce my children to everything that I've found enjoyable throughout my life.
Yeah, and
then they have their own option whether they're going to like it or not.
Yep.
And they'll find stuff that they'll like and stuff that they won't. And In 30 years, maybe somebody will be asking them a question. It's like, when was the first time you watched that? And then it's like, well, my dad pulled this out, and I didn't really like it at the time, but then as I thought about it, you never know what's going to come up.
And the one that I haven't mentioned yet that plays a part every day in my life is roads. Where we're going, we don't need any roads.
Yeah. And on that note, I'd like to thank Mr. O'Brien for being my first guest here. Chris, where can we find you?
I think the best place to find me is runninginsideoutpodcast.com. That's the best place, honestly.
That's the best place. It's got all everything that's connected to you.
That's the only stuff worthwhile. You can go see my blog at ChristopherO'Brien.net that hasn't been updated in 3 years.
And as always, you can find me pretty much anywhere as at GF Media. And you can find us at culturalstew.net, at culturalstewnet on Twitter, and culturalstew on Facebook. Thank you very much, and catch you next time. If you've liked what you've heard, please consider sponsoring us on Patreon. Patreon is a creator support system that allows people to support the things they love and creators to continue doing what they love. Head on over to patreon.com/gfmedia and choose the Cultural Stew podcast levels to show your support for us. Thank you.